and the start of a grave epidemic. As I wrote in Betrayal of Trust, The Collapse of Global Public Health, in which the main text of this ebook first appeared, the Kikwit epidemic afflicted a town of some 450,000 people who lived crammed together, house to house in what amounted to little more than a giant village lacking electricity, running water, sewers, telephones, an airport, or more than a couple of paved roads. The battle against the virus was waged with primitive, almost 14th century methods, gathering up the ailing and dead, quarantining the sick, palliative care using soap and water, and burying victims in mass graves. The fight was waged by a heroic band of local Red Cross volunteers, a handful of medical students, 3 European Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders physicians, and a group of 24 scientists and epidemiologists from Zaire, and a dozen other countries organized by the World Health Organization. Once the team was in place, the 1995 Kikwit epidemic was under control within 3 months. 3 years later, I returned to Kikwit to see how the epidemic's aftermath had affected the place, the people, and the culture. Zaire's longtime dictator, Mobutu Sese Seko, died in 1997 in Moroccan exile, and the country suffered a short but brutal civil war. When rebels opened the vaults of the National Bank, they found only worthless Zaire's notes. Mobutu and his family had looted the nation, stealing an estimated $5 billion in gold, gems, and foreign cash. The country had been poor in 1995, but now it was in a state of dire desperation. I could not have known as I walked the streets of Kinshasa in search of a travel agent to sell me a ticket to Kikwit that the country renamed the Democratic Republic of Congo would still be suffering from uprisings, wars, and brutal militias 16 years later. I found a flight to Kikwit strapped atop an enormous crate full of agricultural tools in the hull of a World War II-era cargo plane. Remarkably, a uniformed flight attendant maneuvered between fellow passengers, also strapped to cargo, to serve Coke and cookies. And as had been the case in 1995, we landed on a grass soccer field, and I chose from a passel of hungry drivers my chauffeur for the duration of my visit. As we drove over the rutted mud roads, I eyed evidence of deterioration and worsened poverty. Children along the road held out their hands for food and shouted as they spotted my white face, "J'ai faim, maman, j'ai faim, aidez-moi, maman." The shouts of grief that filled the air in 1995 had been replaced by cries of starvation. When we reached the hospital that had served as the Ebola quarantine center, my heart sank. The generators and rain catchment devices erected during the epidemic by MSF were long gone. A donated ambulance now served as the local politician thug's private limousine. Instruments were sterilized in large iron cauldrons of water suspended over bonfires. The hospital had been so thoroughly looted by marauding militias that it lacked doorknobs, light bulbs, water pipes, drugs, or valuable medical equipment of any kind. Surgery could only be performed by daylight, and physicians had nothing but rinses of water to protect themselves from their patients' microbes and to prevent germs from spreading into patients' open wounds. One young nurse who had contracted and survived Ebola in 1995 trembled as he described the fear that each day now brought, as he toiled in a hospital without disinfectants, soap, sterilizing equipment, latex gloves, or any protective gear. I left Kikwit in a state bordering on rage. How could the international community have stopped the epidemic, only to abandon the people to conditions that were actually worse than those they lived in before Ebola? Betrayal of Trust describes not only the Kikwit Ebola crisis, but numerous other cases I've investigated all over the world, including inside the United States, illustrating the same pattern of response and abandonment, discovery followed by complacency, urgency that devolves to amnesia. One day's public health crisis is the next's job done and forgotten. By 2013, the world had witnessed 20 Ebola epidemics in Africa. The toolkit was little augmented. No vaccine, treatment, or cure was developed over